Hello everybody. Okay, so this is the second video about introducing development, and today we're also going to introduce the Africa part. And the idea is that you watch these two videos before launching into the other videos about the module. The first one talks to you about what development is and how we measure it and things like that, and this kind of builds on that. So we are starting today with the development gap, 3 question marks. This is something that's actually, it's quite straightforward, but you need an opinion. One of the reasons we leave this module till the end is because it takes quite a lot of time to have confidence to be able to have an opinion, because throughout most of your education you're sort of told what to think and told what to say, and it comes as quite a shock to be like, well, what do I think about this? It's quite a different way of coming at it, and hopefully by this point in your education you are able now to come up with an opinion and justify it and be able to argue it and all of those kinds of things. Right, without further ado, it's sort of a bit like inequality that you learn within the Changing Places module of year 1. Inequality is the gap between the haves and the have-nots, which you can look at visually like that. There are lots of photographs that try to sum up inequality. This is a very, very famous one taken in Brazil. You can think of it as the fact that some people get an escalator ride to the top and other people have to sort of mountain climb to get where they want to go in life. Not everyone has the same route, the same journey. And last time we were very much focused on inequality in the UK. All right, so we were looking at the gaps between groups of society, and we were kind of arguing that because of the spiral of decline that has been caused by so many different things, we have now got great inequality in the UK, which is a major problem. In year 2, we are now looking at the differences between countries. All right, not within countries, but between them. It's the same idea, but in a slightly different perspective. So I just thought I'd remind you of that. It was all Lorenz curves and Gini coefficients, and obviously if you need to revise that, find the Changing Places playlist and find the inequality video, and you'll get all the information that you need. But essentially, you need to make a decision about the development gap, the gap between countries of the world, all right? And what you're going to do is you're going to do some research. I've given you 6 hyperlinks there, but there is the whole internet. There are people, your family, your friends, geography class members. Possibly this might have relevance to other subjects that you study as well. And what you're going to do is you're going to use that research to make a decision. So you might decide that actually you think the gap between countries is getting smaller, that the less developed countries are catching up with the more developed countries. It's not a bigger problem as it used to be. You might decide that it's getting worse. And actually, I think you could bring COVID into this as well. I think COVID will very definitely have had an impact on the development gap. The countries who had healthcare systems that could cope, the countries that have been able to get their hands on vaccinations, and then countries like us who have stockpiled. And I see why they've done it. As a geography teacher, you get quite conflicted at different times because you can see things from different perspectives. It's quite tricky. So definitely feel free to bring COVID in. Or you might be a pretty typical geographer, which is, well, it's a bit of both. It kind of depends on the country. It kind of depends on the situation. And that's fine. As long as you have an opinion that you can justify and argue, fine. Well, I will put caveats on it. I don't need to do this for Hewish students at all. But, caveats would be no extreme views. I can't imagine that any of you would have. But within reason, any opinion is welcome. But, yeah, the usual professional standards would apply. So that's that task, and it's the only thing that I will be checking in class is that you are able to justify your point. And as long as you can do that, and it's a relatively understandable opinion, yeah, great. So, final kind of bit of learning before I start introducing Africa to you. In the first video, when I was saying about what terminology you're allowed to use and what terminology you're not allowed to use, I was saying we don't use groups. We try not to put countries in groups. We try to treat them all on their own merit. I am now about to contradict myself, but I'm going to justify it to you. See, as long as you can justify something. This is not a group that I've made up. This is a group that has been created by the United Nations. They know what they're talking about, so that's the first reason it's okay. But secondly, what I said was we don't want to put countries in groups like MEDCs, more economically developed countries, because as soon as you put something in a group, you are making the assumption that the members of that group are all quite similar. Well, in this case, folks, they are, okay? Because there are some very strict criteria that kind of allow you to be in this group. So actually the members of the least developed countries group are very similar. It is not a group you want to be in at all. And in your module booklet, I've given you the specific detail about what you have to be a least developed country. You have to be very poor. You have to have a GNP of less than $750 per person. That really is low. You need to have some kind of, sounds awful, human problems. So maybe you have widespread malnutrition, maybe you have some kind of healthcare problems, maybe your workforce don't have much education, so they're not literate, or those kinds of things. You're also vulnerable, maybe you're a small island, or maybe you get lots of natural disasters. As I said, it is not a group that you want to be in by any stretch, but the members are quite similar, which is why it's accepted. Okay, here are the members. Now I want you to notice some trends here. In global governance, we talk about landlocked developing countries, LLDCs. We talk a lot about the benefits of having a coastline. Coastlines allow you to trade. They allow you to have an exclusive economic zone. If you are landlocked, you don't have those things. Most of the world's trade, in fact 90% of the world's trade, is done by boat. If you don't have a coastline, that's really hard for you to get involved in, and you're missing out on lots of resources. So you can see being landlocked is often a reason that you end up here. This has nothing to do with sexually infectious disease. It's just an unfortunate coincidence. SID is small island developing state. If you're a small island, just because you're small, life is difficult. Like, you're never going to be able to have an industrial revolution, are you? You're never going to go through the kind of normal pattern of changes. In fact, you're probably going to have to rely mostly on tourism as your main form of income. You are going to be affected by sea level rise, probably sooner than anybody else. So you're really, life is pretty challenging. And then notice Africa, lots and lots of African countries. If they are in these two categories, but they're in bold, it means they're also African. They're landlocked and African, or they're small islands and African. And therefore, if you just kind of really look at that list, the main reason that you become a least developed country is because you're in the continent of Africa. There's clearly something going on here, which is, of course, why we're going to study it in this module. But very clearly, there are sort of three key reasons why you might end up as a least developed country. Landlocked, small island, African. There are 4 exceptions, and I'm not going to go through them, but I'm sure you will certainly know from just your general knowledge that these countries have got some particular issues going on, shall we? And leave it at that. Okay, so least developed countries, yes, it's a group, but hopefully I've justified why that is acceptable. And you don't particularly need to remember names as such, because we will be focusing on a couple of these within the rest of the module. So you will be learning them anyway. Okay. Now there is an exercise that you will do in class, which is about the problems facing the world's least developed countries, where you're going to sort of try and create almost like a flow diagram. And the whole point of that exercise is to get you to understand that the problems facing these countries are so intertwined with each other. It's like, you know, like if you get your shoelaces in a knot, that you actually have to properly sit down for like 10 minutes to undo because it's just such a mess. That's kind of what we're trying to get across with least developed countries. The problems are so many and so interlinked that there's no quick fix. I wish it was. Like, and if I say this every year, if any of you throughout the course of this module kind of think, I reckon that if we did this, it would really help, tell us. It might be one of those ridiculous things where nobody's ever thought of that before. But there are many problems. They're very interlinked. And the phrase I like to use is inextricably interlinked, meaning that they're very hard to unpick. And the exercise is just trying to get you to realise that these countries are, a bit stuck, which is of course why we're doing a whole module about them. Okay, here's a map version just to prove my point about the fact that if you happen to be a country in Africa, chances are you have made it into the least developed countries list, which is a little bit of a shame, but there we are. Okay, so final part of this is just to introduce the lovely, lovely Africa to you. We're starting off just with a physical satellite photo, actually. Look at, isn't the effect of latitude crazy? And this is something you'll learn about in the module, but Africa is spread out over so many latitudes and climate zones that it's got just enormous variation in it. And then, of course, good old Madagascar off to the east. Anyway, right. Why are you looking at a very weird map of Africa? Well, in this module, we are only interested in sub-Saharan Africa. And that means we are not interested in the countries that border the Mediterranean, the countries in the northernmost bit. Why is that? Well, the countries that border the Mediterranean have coastlines. The Mediterranean is a key shipping route. It's got the countries of Europe. These countries also have quite a few resources. Life has generally been a little bit better for the countries that border the Mediterranean, and therefore, because life has been a little bit better for them, we tend not to study them as much. So we're interested in sub-Saharan African countries. Okay, I often shorten that to SSA because I'm lazy. But anyway, sub-Saharan Africa. Now, some of you may spot a mistake on that map. I looked for an up-to-date version of it and couldn't find it. But Sudan now has South Sudan as well. That country had to be split up. South Sudan is the world's newest country, and it is something that we will talk about in this module. Right, there's the Sahara, there's the Sahel. So this firstly reminds you of which countries border the Mediterranean, in case you had forgotten, but you don't need them for this module, so don't spend any time learning them. The Sahel, in one of the local languages, means coast. And the Sahel is kind of like the coast of the Sahara Desert. Bit of a weird idea, but quite cool. So it's not one country. It goes over many, many countries. And it's like the transition zone, if you like, between the Sahara and the rest of Africa. The Sahel we talk about quite a lot because the countries here are at severe risk of becoming part of the Sahara Desert. So there's a process called desertification happening that we will study. Anyway, but that's where the Sahel is. Okay, it's not one place. It's a long old line across the whole of the continent, immediately south of the Sahara Desert. I'm not going to say too much about colonialism because there's a whole separate video on that, but just one thing is, and of course this is not a complete map, it's just an idea. Pre-colonialism, tribes would have had different bits of Africa. Some of the tribal areas, as you can quite clearly see, would have overlapped. It was quite normal to be nomadic, which means that you moved around with the rainy seasons in certain places. I'm not saying for any moment that everything was lovely and calm and brilliant, but I'm sure that the tribes had reached some form of compromise about things. Where we sort of joined the story is in the late 1800s, where we have something called the Berlin Conference, which is a meeting. And what was happening was Europe was going through its industrial revolution, and we were running out of resources. What you do need a lot of in an industrial revolution are resources. And so they started thinking, well, where can we get more resources and where might not put up too much of a fight? And what these European powers did is they divided Africa up, as you can see, and split it between themselves. And for us in this module, this is kind of really where we begin our story. And we will question the impact that that has had on Africa today and years ago and all of those kinds of things. So it's just worth knowing a little bit about the fact that Africa was colonised by the Europeans. This has been mentioned in Global Governance, where we talked about the British Empire and how that made us rich and powerful. So if you're getting a sense of deja vu, good, that's excellent. This is a modern map. Here is South Sudan, look. Ta-da! So this is an up-to-date proper map. So first things first, Africa is very definitely a continent. Please. There are 54 countries in Africa, but we do repeatedly get people talking about the country of Africa. You're not going to fail your A-level, but it's not great, is it? So 54 countries, all of whom are incredibly different, very, very different, for lots of reasons that we will discover. But one thing that does sort of group a lot of them together is that they're not doing particularly brilliantly on the Human Development Index. So this is our highest ranking. Well, so for the whole continent of Africa, the Seychelles is doing the best, probably because of tourism. But the Seychelles and Mauritius at the top of the pile. Botswana, we're going to choose 5 countries that you're going to kind of focus on. Botswana is our highest of the 5. So that comes globally 101st, room 101, 101st. So that's already quite low, and yet, you know, in African standards, that's really high. Their very highest country is 62nd. We're beginning maybe to get a sense that life is a bit tricky. So there's Botswana. Kenya is our next, 142nd. DR Congo, 176th, and then Burkina Faso and Sierra Leone. Notice that African countries tend to be towards the end of the Human Development Index. There were lots of them in the least developed countries. Something's going on. There's got to be something that's causing this. So these are trailers to films that would be useful. They are definitely not compulsory because they are not what you would call feel-good movies. They are quite tough to watch. They're very powerful. Yeah, I think I'm getting sort of softer as I get older. I would find some of those really hard to watch now. Just, you know, almost too much, really. So they're absolutely not compulsory at all. I'm just saying, if you like a film, you find that a good way to learn, then you would learn something from all of these movies. They would help set the scene for this module really quite well, but I shall leave that to you. I've just realised that unless I teach you, you haven't got the hyperlinks, so I'll tell you. One of them is a film called Shooting Dogs. One of them is a film called The Constant Gardener. One of them is a film called The Last King of Scotland. One of them is, I'm gonna have to open them, aren't I? That's Shooting Dogs, right, I remembered that one. Blood Diamond, of course, about diamonds in Sierra Leone. Last King of Scotland, I remembered. Constant Gardener, I remembered. Oh, Half of a Yellow Sun as well. Okay, so as I said, they're good, but you don't have to. And then before we go any further in the module, the next thing is to kind of get to know these 5 countries as much as you can. I'm not expecting you to become a living encyclopedia at all, but if you knew a few kind of bits of information about these, it is going to make the rest of the module much easier for you, because what we try to do is we try to link back the theory that you're going to learn to these 5 countries wherever possible. So if you're here a student and you've got a module booklet, there's a kind of a task for you to do, but yeah, it's pretty much as much as you can. And I've included some hyperlinks there. The CIA, the World Factbook, is just an excellent resource. It really, really is brilliant. Obviously the BBC are fab. This channel,
all right, here we are,
you will either love or hate. He's kind of quite marmitey. I think he's brilliant. I really, really do. So I believe he's called Paul Barboa, and he has a YouTube channel called Geography Now, and he produces a little video about every country in the world, which is just amazing. So to help you learn about these 5 countries, you can watch a little video about each country, or indeed if there's a country in the world that you're like, I don't really know anything about that place, you get like a 10-minute overview. I think it's excellent, I really do. So yeah, get to know your 5 countries, ladies and gents, and then you'll be ready for the rest of the module.